But a shadow Galvus is cast by the blade Ascians casts, a long shadow over the warrior of light. Star he a mirror, chaste paved with borrowed time. The Galvus's blade casts Ascians did not long guide him to the source shadow over. They guided him through it, every chain by star he chain, until his justice became their instrument. What truth did he carve from the storm? But a master's, the citadel falls, the source he breathes. The chaste was not a crown prize, prince's smile, frozen in duty, repeats the trap. What if Zenos ye Galvus was never a seeker, but a shadow cast by the Ascian's will? The source he chased was not a prize, but a mirror. Each step toward Aetheri's heart was a tether, each revelation a script etched in starlight and blood. The crown prince's hunger was their hunger, his sacrifice their currency. The cycle does not end, it only shifts. The citadel's rubble still hums with his name, warped into a hymn of false purpose. What did he mistake for destiny was a noose, woven with his own hands. The Ascians did not need his power, they needed his obedience. The smile that froze his face was not duty, it was a curse. A millennia-long snare, sprung the moment he first spoke the source's tongue. What lie did the Ascians weave into his journey, the belief he chose? The Convocation's obsidian throne hummed a chill that seeped into bone. Zenos stood there, armor etched with scars from battles fought for script written in dead stars. The Ascians gifted him purpose, cleaved the source from eternity. His war against the Scions was no rebellion, it was a reenactment, a mirror polished over millennia. When he bound Shinryu, the dragon's roar shattered the sky, molten breath scorching plains. The air thickened with ozone. Yet in the fire, Zenos saw only his adversary, warrior of light whose resolve mirrored the Scions' ancient, metaphysical love, a force the Ascians swore to unmake. His final duel atop Amarot's spire was a dirge. The warrior's blade sang through the storm, each strike a requiem for stolen choices. Cloaked as the azure dragoon, Zenos felt eons in his grip. Did he wonder between heartbeats if his rage was another's design? The Ascians wove his hunger into a snare. Each victory tightened the thread around his soul. When he claimed the title of emperor, the source dimmed, its light fraying like a tapestry. The cycle breathes. The Ascians' laughter lingers in the static between worlds. Their design is unfinished. Zenos' shadow stretches across time, chasing a crown that was never his. The source waits. The thread hums not triumph but a question. The obsidian throne of the Convocation hummed with a chill that seeped into bone. Zenos stood there, his armor etched with the scars of battles fought not for power, but for a script written in the dust of dead stars. The Ascians had gifted him a purpose, to become the blade that would cleave the source from eternity. His war against the Scions was no mere rebellion, it was a reenactment, a mirror polished over millennia to reflect the primal war between light and shadow. When he bound Shinryu, the dragon's roar shattered the sky, its molten breath scorching the plains below, leaving the air thick with the acrid tang of ozone. Yet in the fire, Zenos saw only the silhouette of his adversary, warrior of light whose resolve mirrored the Scions' ancient, metaphysical love, a force the Ascians had sworn to unmake. His final duel atop the Amarot spire was a dirge. The warrior of light's blade sang through the storm, each strike a requiem for choices never his to make. Zenos, cloaked in the mantle of the azure dragoon, felt the weight of eons in his grip. Did he wonder, in the space between heartbeats, if his rage was but the echo of another's design? The Ascians had woven his hunger for the source into a snare, each victory a thread tightening around his soul. When he claimed the title of emperor, the source itself dimmed, its light fraying like a tapestry unraveling at the edges, and still the cycle breathes. The Ascians' laughter lingers in the static between worlds, their design unfinished. Zenos' shadow stretches across time, a king forever chasing a crown that was never his. The source waits. The tapestry waits, and in the dark, the thread of his name hums not a triumph, but a question. The name hangs between Thema blades sheathed in light. Zenos ye Galvus, crown prince of light, seals his fate when he calls the warrior his equal, a gesture, a confession. A key turned in a lock forged eons ago. The Ascian snare closes silent as a breath. Venat's refusal to ascend carved the first notch. Emet-Selch's volunteering to become a god split the grain. Harsheffent's sidestep into oblivion splintered the door. 3 choices, 3 threads woven into the loom of Aetheres. their delusions became the loom's design. Zenos, last of their kind, believed himself the weaver. He was the shuttle, guided by shadows. He's the source not as prisoner but as pawn. Every clash with the warrior sharpens his obsession. Every victory etches deeper the lie, that breaking the cycle will restore balance. The source, the Ascians whisper, waits to be freed. A god's sacrifice, a world's rebirth, but the source is no captive. It is the hunger the Ascians once were. Zenos' delusion is his instrument. His rage at the warrior's defiance fuels the engine of their plan. The more he fights, the more he unravels the veil between worlds. Aether's and the source will merge not in salvation, but in collision. The crown prince's triumph will drown his name in the tide of reunification. What did he think he hunted? A leak in reality, a wound to suture. The Ascians gave him a mirror. He saw a hero. He was a hammer. They let him believe the anvil was the enemy. The warrior's true equal is not Zenos. It is the choice he never madeth path where the prince stepped aside. That path was sealed the day he spoke that name. The trap was not in the source, it was in the story the stars told him, and the story still spins. The stars whispered of a path to power, but each step was a chain. The source was never liberation, only a promise stolen from a future he could not yet see. And the cycle, as you know, still breathes. The cycle still breathes. Zenos ye Galvus reached for the source, but the source was a snare. The ancients who died for Zodiark were not his pawn's, they were the price. The Scions, tethered by love that defied time, became his shadow. They chose unity, he chose the hollow crown. What lie did the Ascians weave? A promise of reunion, a phantom of purpose. They let him believe the final days were a catastrophe to be averted. In truth, Fandaniel's rekindling was the spark they needed. To force the rejoining, to shatter Aether's, to make of his sacrifice a wheel, Zenos burned his empire to fuel the abyss. His followers, the Scions who refused to turn away, drank the same poison. Their bonds frayed, then fused woven into the very fabric of the Ascian's design. They called it salvation. He called it absolution, but the source was never a path, it was a prison, and he, its warden. The ancients fell, their ageless wisdom devoured by Zodiark's collapse. Hydaelyn's light dimmed. Venat rose, a god unchained, to herald the end of all things. What remains of the man who traded his soul for a lie? A name whispered in the silence between stars. A crown of thorns where a heart once beat. The Scion's love, the one truth he could not unmake, became his final echo. They stayed, they suffered. They became the bridge between his failure and the cycle's endless hunger. The cost, a kingdom, 1,000 lives, a god's final breath. And Zenos, alone in his tower of ash, became both architect and ash. The Ascian's design outlived him. The rejoining waits, and the cycle, as you know, still breathes. The crown prince's blade never found the source. It found only chains. For every step Zenos took toward the truth, the Ascians rewound his path, a puppet master's cruel arithmetic. A warlord's wrath became a martyr's grief, a king's ambition, a scholar's delusion. Did the whisper in his ear promise salvation, or did it starve him of it? He carved his name into history as a savior. He carved his name into eternity as a key. The Ascians did not whisper anymore when the time came. They watched him kneel before the warrior of light, the blade raised not to strike but to surrender. A debt, he called it, a reckoning, a fool's parable. The blow he gave was not his to give. It was the lock turning on itself. Grahatada, the scholar who mapped the heavens, became the exarch who mapped his own collapse. His mind split like a mirror. One shard screamed for the source, one wept for the lie. The Ascians needed a god to die, not a man to rule. So they dressed his madness in sainthood. So they let him believe he burned the tower to find he was the ash. The killing blow shattered the cycle, or so he thought. The rejoining waits not for a hero, but for a trigger. Aether's hunger is patient. It tastes the blood of gods. Zenos' final act was not defiance, it was obedience. A thread pulled in the weave of millennia. He thought he shaped the legend. The legend shaped him. What lie outlives a liar? The Ascians did not need his power. They needed his belief. A god who thinks himself a prisoner becomes the lock. A warlord who thinks himself free becomes the tool. The warrior of light did not save the world. He sealed a bargain older than Hythlodaeus' bones. The cycle breathes, it always will. Zenos' name fades, but his shadow remains, a blade raised, a debt paid, a trap sprung. And in the silence after the blow, the Ascians whisper again. not to a prince, not to a martyr, to the wind, to the stars. To the next hand that reaches for the source. In the ethereal sea, Zenos ye Galvus remains a fractured echo, not a martyr, not a king, a piece of a cycle that never ceased. The Scions of the seventh dawn walk free, yet carry his name like a cautionary hymn. What lie did the Ascians weave? A path to the source, painted as salvation, became a gilded cage. Each step toward truth bound him tighter, until millennia blurred into a single, endless prayer. The cycle was never meant to end, only to turn again, with new hands reaching, new stars burning. Zeno's pursuit was not defiance, it was a script written before his first breath. Now his whispers drift where ether and shadow merge, a warning, not a requiem, for the stars remember, and someday a seeker will follow the same constellations. Whispers drift where ether and shadow merge, a warning, not a requiem, for the stars remember, and someday a seeker will follow the same constellations. Zenos ye Galvus, crowned in his own hubris, believed the source a key. The Ascians, patient weavers, made it a cage. His thirst for dominion was their script of performance rehearsed in dead stars. He carved his path through time's rot, blind to the stage. The warrior of light walked that same path, but saw the chains. Love, not conquest, became their compass. A bond between Scions, metaphysical as a heartbeat, fused to shatter the Ascians' clockwork. Yet the cycle only paused, a breath held too long. The crown prince was no hero, he was a gear in Aetheri's slow grind. His empire of ash, his hollow crown, both were the Ascians' dividend. They shaped his rage, his hunger, his endless march toward the source. They needed a hammer, not a king. A force to crack the cycle's shell. The warrior unwittingly became the antithesis. Their choice tenderness overthrown fractured the Ascians' design, but the architects endure. The cycle's gears merely rusted, not unmade. What lie did the Ascians weave? That destiny is a straight road, it is a spiral. Zenos climbed it, thinking to claim the summit. The warrior climbed it, recognizing the staircase was the prison. Both reached the same door. One burned it, the other left it ajar. The source still hums, the stars still burn. And the next hand to reach for the constellations may find the same trap gilded, waiting, alive. The lie the Ascians wove into his path was a gilded chain. His quest to the source was not a choice. It was a script etched in the stars before time named him. For millennia he played the pawn, believing his blade shaped destiny, yet each strike was theirs to guide. His final vow, a king's debt paid in a god's blood, was the last note in their ancient score. The killing blow he owed was a performance, a ritual to reset the cycle. His breath fades, his words crystallize. Asterisk, I will grant you the killing blow I believe I owe you. Asterisk, a god's last act, not of will but design. The curtain falls. The stage remains, and the next actor steps forward, unknowing, into the same eternal loop. What did the Ascians trade for Zenos' blind march? His war was their clockwork, his fall their key. The warrior of light stirs again, Scions gather, a new era breathes. But shadows stretch long where old lies fester. Will the cycle shatterer forge anew? The stage is